Good afternoon. I'd like to get started. Take your seats. We have a good session coming up here. Before, though, I mentioned the business of the afternoon. I want to say I was remiss this morning in introducing members of the distinguished members of the Academy who are here. I forgot to mention, of course, one of our most distinguished, Dr. Bob Curl. I don't know if Bob's around. I apologize, Bob. You were here all through the evening last night and here today, so I wanted to make sure you all knew that he was here. We now have David Daniels, UT Dallas, is here, and we have Harry Sweeney here is on the board. So thanks for our board for showing up. It's important to have them here. And now we're going to go into the afternoon session where we're dealing with, finally, effective teaching. Why is it missing and how to get it back? And we have a wonderful panel, and I can't think of a more important and appropriate moderator than my co-chair of the Education Steering Committee, Marianne Rankin. Dr. Rankin, as you all know, really needs no introduction. She has established a pioneering system that was actually, UTeach was listed as an example in the Gathering Storm report of what needs to be done. And we were very proud of that. So we're going to hear more this afternoon in session one with Marianne, and I'll call her to the stand to introduce her panel.
Thank you, Bill. It's a great pleasure to be here this afternoon. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here. We're really excited to participate in this wonderful program. We've heard a lot of information this morning that I hope we've been able to digest along with our lunch. We are going to have a little bit different style for this presentation, although we will show a few slides, but I wanted to run this more like one of those Sunday morning news shows, you know, where there are all these people sitting around a table and the moderator asks questions and these brilliant people from their point of expertise respond to those questions and give all the solutions and whatever and analysis. Anyway, that's the venue we're going to try for this morning. I want to introduce our wonderful panel here. But let me just say a few words first about the problems in general that I think we all know we're facing with teacher shortages in math and science in Texas and certainly far beyond. I mean, the problem that we're facing in Texas and elsewhere in the nation is that too many students at all levels just don't have access to science and math education as they should. And as we're seeing with this morning's presentation, those issues are more severe in inner city schools where the numbers of minorities are high and so on. As we've heard a number of times today, the Rising Above the Gathering Storm report indicated that the quality of K-12 math and science education and teacher training, the numbers of math and science teachers, is really one of the most important core problems facing the country today. The RAGS report called for annually recruiting and training 10,000 new science and math teachers nationally to influence 10 million minds, and that's a really sort of staggering goal when you look at the numbers of teachers in some disciplines that are currently being produced, or even the number of students majoring in those disciplines, not even preparing to be teachers. It really emphasizes the need to involve math and science faculty in our major research universities in teacher education, to develop new pathways and incentives to enter the teaching profession, and establishing goals and incentives and support systems for the improvement of in-service math and science teaching. We're going to focus for the next hour or so on that family of issues and hopefully come up with some suggested solutions. I think the situation in Texas has improved somewhat in recent years, but it's still the case that I looked at the 2006 numbers. 28% of middle school math teachers weren't certified that year to teach math. 24% of science teachers were not certified to teach science in middle school. 28% of high school science teachers were not certified to teach the science course they were assigned to teach last year. So Texas has a serious issue to face, as does the nation. Now, Texas has a great deal to be proud of, and I loved that Uri celebrated some of our real achievements in this arena. I would also like to celebrate some of the wonderful programs that we've developed. You've heard about some of them already today. We are only going to have a little sampling here this morning, or this afternoon, excuse me, in our panel, but I do think we have a real reason to celebrate. Two of the programs you're going to hear about in a few minutes, and from the perspective of the leadership, hopefully get some advice, were mentioned in the RAGS report as national models and are being taken to scale. Yesterday, in fact, I was in Washington along with Mr. O'Donnell participating in a meeting of the Board of Directors of the National Math and Science Initiative, a 501(c) organization that will take two of these programs, AP Strategies and UTeach, to national scale. With a $125 million gift from ExxonMobil, NIMSI, as we affectionately call the Institute, will oversee the replication of AP Strategies at 7 sites nationally and UTeach at 10 sites nationally. And as speaking from the UTeach perspective, UTeach is going to be replicated at some of the finest universities in the country when these announcements will come out in the next couple of weeks as to where they are. The board met yesterday to make those decisions. After a nationally released request for proposals, we actually had 52 universities across the country responding with proposals on very short notice. So that response, with just a couple of weeks' notice, shows how ripe the nation is, I think, to try to address these questions. From those 52, we culled to 29. We got 26 final proposals, and from those we chose 10, and it was very difficult. Many of the institutions that we did not choose or recommend for funding are going to replicate the program anyway. So this is very exciting, and I think, as I say, this is coming from Texas, and Texas has reason to be proud. You heard earlier from a variety of people here about other programs in Texas, and you're going to hear something about the regional collaboratives in a moment here, another Texas program. And the Dana Center could hardly be in more venues and situations as advisors, and Uri as a major advisor, and as teacher support in teacher support programs across the country, and particularly in Texas. So we have a group of experts here this morning, and let me just introduce them. And what I'm going to do is, after I finish the introductions, ask a leading question, but also ask them to say a few words, not too many, about their own programs, so you get a sense of what those programs are. But then moving on, I'd like to really lead a dialogue. We have a list of questions we've thought of, but I'd also like to take some questions from the audience and feed them to these experts about how, okay, we have all these successes, some of which you're going to hear about in a moment, some of which you've heard about. Where do we go next? We've still got a big problem to face. Taking programs to scale is a big part of that, I think. How do you deal with the numbers of teachers that we really need? And the numbers we're going to need, when you look at the numbers of teachers who are about to retire in STEM disciplines, it's terrifying. So anyway, hopefully we'll get some good advice here, and we can proceed to try to implement that in the future. So let me introduce our panel. Carol Fletcher is the Assistant Director and Research and Development Coordinator of the Regional Collaboratives for Excellence in Science and Math Education. This is a program out of UT Austin, College of Education. It's an outstanding initiative developed by Dr. Camille Jabali and Dr. Jim Barafaldi in the College of Education there at UT. It's aimed at assisting in-service teachers in the delivery of rigorous science curriculum. Initially, I think, aimed at the elementary school, but moving now into middle and high school as well. They have 59 P through 16 partnerships across Texas, and I'll let Carol tell you more about that. Carol, being the assistant director, means that she actually makes everything happen, so she really knows. She also has served in a number of other educational situations. She's on the board and actually chairman of the board of trustees of the Pflugerville School District. She's active in the Texas Association of School Boards and has a lot of experience in K through 12 classrooms. Dr. Larry Abraham is a co-director of the UTeach program, the education component of the UTeach program at the University of Texas at Austin. He's also chairman of the Department of Curriculum Instruction at UT Austin, oversees teacher certification through that program for the College of Education. He's also served as Associate Dean of Education. He's a scientist himself with an award-winning research program in movement physiology. He's worked with us in the College of Natural Sciences on the UTeach program for 10 years. He's helped us shepherd the program through numerous hurdles that it encountered in its early days. He's extremely knowledgeable and wise about teaching, teacher preparation, and teacher support. Reisman, you've already heard from today. I know you share my awe of him. He is an internationally recognized expert in mathematics education. He served as an advisor to numerous governmental agencies and foundations. The list is way too long to mention. He directs the UT Austin Charles A. Dana Center, and this is an organized research and service unit at UT Austin, and I'm proud to say in the College of Natural Sciences. He's involved as an advisor in so many different aspects of K through 12 STEM education in the country that it's impossible to mention them all. But let me just say he was in his early days responsible for developing a program to nurture high achievement in mathematics among minority students, for which he was named a MacArthur Fellow. Most recently, I think in 2006, he was named Scientist of the Year by the Harvard Foundation of Harvard University for these outstanding contributions to math and science education. We're very fortunate to have him with us this morning and have him with us in Texas. Mr. Peter O'Donnell is president of the O'Donnell Foundation and has been one of the most important forces for improvement in science and math education in the country, and certainly in Texas. He has really revolutionized a lot of what goes on at UT Austin and at some of the major medical schools, particularly Southwestern in Texas, and he's been incredibly important in K through 12 math and science education as well. Most relevant for today's panel, he founded the AP Strategies program, which, as you'll see, has some of the best results in improving math and science performance among students, and also is really an important program in improving math and science content knowledge for teachers through the advanced placement courses in math and science. He founded AP Strategies, and this is one of the other two programs that will be taken to scale through the National Math and Science Initiative with the ExxonMobil money. Mr. O'Donnell was part of the committee that produced the Gathering Storm report and is currently chairman of the board of the National Math and Science Initiative Board of Trustees. We were also to be joined by Ann Best, who is head of the Texas Division of Teach for America, but we learned a couple of days ago that she had a family obligation and couldn't be with us this morning. Since Uri serves on the board of, oh dear, I'm not going to remember what it is, which one it is, Uri. Yeah, the New Teacher Project, thank you, and has a lot of experience with these alternative certification pathways. We're going to ask him to represent that area as well. So, as I said, I want each of the panelists to please just say a few words about their own programs. With Uri, that's going to be almost impossible since he has so many. But then I'll pose the first question for them to answer as experts from the perspective of their experience with their own programs. And tell us what you think is the most important gap that we need to fill in K through STEM education. What are the most critical barriers to effective STEM teaching, and how would you say we should go about removing them? So get us into the topic. And I'd like to start with Carol, who is the only female over here.
Are you going to be doing
yes, I think
simultaneous? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'll start off.
Be up there.
While those are coming up. Thank you. The Texas Regional Collaboratives Program, just very briefly, it's a statewide network. We are housed at the University of Texas at Austin, but we have 59 subawards or subgrants across the state. 43 institutions of higher education participate in the network. We have last year we had 35 science collaboratives. This year we have 37. And last year we added mathematics. Last year we had 20 mathematics collaboratives. This year we have 22. So that's where the 59 number comes from. The map is showing data from the previous year, and I'm focusing just on science since we are stepping very lightly into mathematics. But you can see we are really all over the state in the coverage that we have. And actually, in the last year, over 700 school districts in the state of Texas received services from the Texas Regional Collaboratives. And there's only like 1,037 districts in the state. So we're doing a lot of coverage. Our program focuses on high-intensity, sustained professional development. For science teachers, they receive 105 hours of professional development. The investment that we make in these people, we then expect them to turn around and mentor and support and serve as a resource agent for teachers at their campus, in their district, and build leadership capacity in that way. And that gives me a good opportunity to segue into the question of scale, which I'll come back to in just a minute. But I did want to go through just very briefly. We've been talking a lot about data. Very briefly, I want to share with you just a few vignettes. The Rice University Regional Collaborative is Dr. Wallace Dominy here at Rice heads our regional collaborative. And the data that we have, basically, sum it up, indicates there is a correlation between participation in the regional collaborative, teacher training, and student achievement. Rice University did a research study for us recently which looked at teachers of students in the program pre and post as compared to students of teachers not in the program pre and post, and you can see we noted some differences in student achievement as a result of that. Go ahead, Marianne. I was really glad that Michael talked about commended achievement recently, because that's an area that we look at when we collect data as well. It's not as easy. One of the recommendations I would make is make it easier on the AAIS to collect commended achievement data individually by school. But when we looked at we collected data in Round Rock ISD, we train teachers on a particular program. We actually measure their implementation of the program, and then we compared the teachers with greater levels of implementation to teachers with less levels of implementation. It's a bit complex, but you can see in percent meeting standard, the yellow is they came to the training, but they didn't implement. The blue is they came to the training, they did some implementation, about half, and the red is they implemented all of the lessons in the training. You can see from year to year, the increase in the passing percentage at these schools was correlated to the level of implementation. And actually, in the commended percentage, there was actually a decrease in the schools in their commended rates that did not implement, even though they received training, and a notable increase for those that did implement. Okay. And lastly, talking about closing the achievement gap, we've spent a lot of time today talking about the achievement gap between our economically disadvantaged students and our ethnic minority students and others in Texas schools. This is an example of an intervention we had in Galveston ISD. If you look at the gain scores and scale score from 03 to 04, then 04 to 05, and then 05 to 06. We took the 6 lowest performing elementary schools in Galveston ISD. We had an intensive intervention where we trained those teachers, had a person in there modeling appropriate inquiry strategies, gave them the materials to do the actual implementation themselves. Prior to our intervention, the gain scores for those low-performing schools were half of the gain scores of everyone else. So as you can see, when those gain scores are half, that gap continues to widen every time. After our intervention, you can see the closing of the gap, and the gain scores for the schools we intervened with actually exceeded the gain scores for the rest of Galveston ISD. So we are really proud of that data because we feel like that is closing the gap. And we continue to collect numerous pieces of data similar to this, but that's all I wanted to show you for now. With regard to answering the question about what are those barriers and what we have, how we plan on tackling them, I think the greatest barrier we have is the scale-up. And that's one of the things that we have tried to address. Has anyone read The Tipping Point in here? Tipping Point? If you haven't, you need to read it. It's one of those things you can read on a couple of trips between DFW and here on Southwest Airlines. But the model that we use in the regional collaborative, there's probably a decent estimate would be that there's 135,000 elementary teachers who are expected to teach science in the state of Texas, another 15 to 20,000 secondary teachers expected to teach science. So we've got 150,000 teachers we have to help that are already there, not the pre-service. And our model acknowledges that and tries to address that by, rather than training everyone intensively, which we know will not happen, we take a certain group of teachers, many of whom are self-selecting to the program, but we deliver to them intensive training that's coupled with content knowledge within the context of lessons they will deliver in the classroom, not disconnected from what they're going to do in the classroom. We give them support to attend. We pay for substitutes, stipends. We give them materials. We challenge them. We expect them to then go back into the classroom and share what they've learned. We ask them to present at conferences like the CAST conference, to present with their peers, and we do it in a very comfortable setting so that they can feel safe in stepping outside of just their teacher role. And they're with a network of like-minded people, so they scale that. So that's how we address the scale-up issue. We can't train 150,000 teachers, but we can train, last year, almost 1,300 teachers with 105 hours of training each. And so we feel like we are making a dent in the scaling problem, and we feel like the data shows that it could be possible that we're also making an impact on student achievement.
Uri, what about you? You have another large, already scaled up organization.
Right, but let me, hearing the previous comments, in my role at the Noyce Foundation, I'm a senior advisor to the Robert N. Noyce Foundation. We looked at these professional development efforts. We got a panel of experts to identify the 8 highest rated professional development initiatives for math and science teachers in the U.S., ranging from things that some might feel are naive, adopting an Asian textbook and building professional support around it, to very sophisticated content-based learning communities. We got a crackerjack team of researchers with no dog in the race. We went to the districts. In no single case did the districts have the capacity to evaluate the efforts that they had invested in. In 0 of these cases. Second, we then hired people to go in and build teacher-student linked data sets, and we found 0 effect on student learning, especially when you used regression discontinuity designs. The evidence standard for professional training, we wrote a piece in Ed Week on this if you're interested. The evidence standard for the work we do in professional development has to go way up. People evaluate their own programs, they collect data, they show gains on particular kids, but I want to know where those kids were 4 or 5 years ago and how they controlled for internal selection artifacts. If we are serious, and I think Peter's work is the high point of this, is really the best example. But most of the work that sounds right doesn't actually work. The Boston Coaching Initiative, one of the great examples of content-based coaching, felt so good, people couldn't believe it wasn't contributing to student learning. So we need, if we're going to use performance management ideas, we need metrics that are reliable. We need districts that have the capacity to actually assess the effects of their investments in education. Without data, right, we're going to be able to improve the system. Second point, where are the teachers going to come from? There is a profound sea change out there. So 18,000 of the elite college graduates signed up for Teach for America this year. They only took 3,000. 8% of Caltech's senior class signed up for Teach for America. 12% of Harvard. 10% of Dartmouth. The idea that Darv mentioned in the beginning, women's liberation is the cause here, right? Women have other options. The brightest college graduates in the United States are saying, I want to serve. I teach full-time, professors must profess. These freshmen, A, have love of country. I love them. They're patriotic. They're optimistic. They want to serve. How are we going to draw the other 15,000 of those people who average college GPA was 3.6, 93% of whom had leadership experience in their undergraduate institutions? How do we create vehicles for them to come in? Just one other second. The New Teacher Project. I chair the Chancellor's Advisory Panel for Mathematics in New York City. Right? We hire 8,800 teachers a year. It's like a quarter of Texas, right? We had a terrible problem with uncertified, emergency certified teachers. One Teach for America alumna, Michelle Rhee, solved the problem instantaneously. She put an ad in the New York City subway that said, you remember your first grade teacher's name? Who will remember your name? We got 7,000 applicants, mostly from Wall Street, in 2 weeks. We have not had a single emergency certified math teacher. This social entrepreneur produced 23% of our secondary math teachers in New York City. They stay because they're 28 to 32. They're not like 22-year-olds who go through a period of wandering, right? They're the ones who stay and become principals. Last, we have tens of thousands of early retirees. Another Teach for America alum, Jennifer Anastasoff, is building efforts that allow teams of retirees to work as school partners. They work on the courses with teachers, and they build a structure that allows teachers to get together out of their classrooms with trust that things won't fall apart. The days when colleges of education were the major producers of teachers are over. We need to scale up UTeach. It's making a profound difference. It's only one piece of the problem. What are the incentives we're going to create for the retirees to go into schools? I look at Senator Shapiro and Representative Eisler. How are we going to create? How are we going to create those incentives? How are we going to make it easier for these people to come in? That's the challenge. It's not that there's no market for it, right? The question is, what structures will we build to support new kinds of people in our schools?
Bravo. Larry, you want to tell us a little bit about UTeach and give us your perspective?
Sure. I'll race through a few slides just in case there are people here that need to see exactly what we've been doing. The UTeach program started about 10 years ago as a collaborative effort between the two colleges, Education and Natural Sciences, led by the deans, Marianne Rankin and Manuel Justiz, recognizing the fact that for the last 20 years in Texas, students going through college to be prepared to be teachers of math and science needed to be enrolled in the College of Natural Sciences, majoring in math and science. And there weren't easy incentives and pathways for them to find teaching as a career as they came into that college. So we've turned that around. These are the data that show over the years how we've increased enrollment in the program. We're just under 500 students now in the program, and that's about the capacity that we have given the resources we have, but it's certainly much larger than when we started. If we look at the number of graduates, what you see is the people that are coming out of UT Austin now has dramatically risen, certified in secondary math and science and computer science. And that really is attributed to the fact that we aggressively recruit students. We work hard to support them, to give them authentic experiences. We allow them to do this within a regular 4-year, 120-hour degree program that doesn't take extra time or extra money. It doesn't require them to give up their hopes of qualifying to go to medical school or other career options as well. It just gives this as another choice, although we're proud to say that most of them do choose education. These data show some of the characteristics of this group, and what we can say about them is that there's a overrepresentation of minority students. There is a high GPA. They succeed and graduate much higher than the average for the entering freshman class of the College of Natural Sciences. And so these are good students. This shows retention data. We have only just now begun to have 5 or 6 years of graduates out, and really only now can start to compare ourselves to the national story, which is the green bars up there. But our data are on the right, and we're showing a much higher retention of our graduates, that 80% are still in the classroom after being out 5 years, which is well above the national and state average. So we think, again, that one of the hallmarks of our program not only is that we turned around and dramatically increased the number of graduates, but they're staying there, which is like a doubling of the effect. And I think we attribute that to a large extent to the preparation and also the continued support that we provide. There are a number of the key features that we believe are important. We work closely with them throughout their entire program, preferably all 4 years that they're with us, to provide field experiences, to provide guidance and mentoring with experienced teachers, to provide resources, scholarships, internships that encourage them and support them. We have a revised curriculum that is particularly focused on science and math education rather than perhaps general education preparation. It's streamlined. It's 18 semester credit hours. Of course, we're starting with great students, and they're talented. They're learning a lot about science and math in their majors. And our focus is turning that to include an understanding of what is often called pedagogical content knowledge. That is, not just knowing the content, but knowing how it is that people understand it and learn it and acquire it, and how you can facilitate that process. So I think those are sort of the key features of the program that we're very proud of, and we're boldly, I guess, going on to help other institutions around the country replicate. In answer to your question, Dean Rankin, I think my biggest concern at this point is the fact that when you look across the state, there is tremendous inequity. There is inequity of access to quality teaching, and it drives huge disparities among schools and classrooms, communities of students. And there are clearly students that from the beginning, from elementary school up through high school and college, are simply being left behind. A lot of that has to do with the fact that they are not being taught by skilled, high-quality teachers, teachers that have both content knowledge and knowledge of how to teach. But there's another piece of that, and that is that in many classrooms in our state, the environment is not conducive to learning. There are many, many factors that affect what goes on in a classroom. Good learning won't happen if you don't have a good teacher, but even with a great teacher, good learning won't happen if the teaching isn't going on. If there are students that don't understand what's going on, don't care about what's going on, are trying actively to disrupt what's going on, have special needs that aren't being addressed, whether they're physical or emotional or mental, It reaches out into communities and homes. But what we see when we send our graduates out into classrooms, either in their practicing experience or in their teaching full-time experience, is that what they're able to do, what they report back to us as their significant challenges, often are things that are not the plain bread and butter, how do you prepare someone to be a teacher, but it's dealing with individual cases. And when you have large class sizes with huge numbers of students with special needs, the students aren't being well served. The teachers are actually becoming discouraged. These are the issues that I think are the greatest challenge for us.
I think I'd like to come back to that in a follow-on question, Larry, about new teacher support and teachers being brought in from all these different perspectives. But Peter, would you tell us about what I think is one of the most dramatically successful programs we've encountered, AP Strategies?
Well, let's see where to start. I was on the Super Ladder Commission for the state of Texas, and we wanted to improve the schools there. We were very mediocre, but the people that were being recruited were world-class scientists and engineers, and they wanted good schools for their children. And those schools were mediocre, and we hit on a combination of advanced placement to set the standard, and I added something of financial incentives, which were not present at that time in education. So it went well. We've been at it now since 1990, so we've had a bunch of experience scars and so forth. I've boiled our lessons learned down to 8 words. The teacher is key. We do everything we can to recruit, train, recognize, and reward outstanding teachers. It's just too hard to get a student to pass a college-level course in high school unless they're really good. So that is the key. The second thing is incentives work. We've used them now, and there are all kinds of incentives, but financial incentives, and it doesn't put them on easy street. A good teacher might make $4,000 or $5,000. Well, the average teacher pay in Dallas now is like $48,000. Okay, not on easy street, but it better than breaking a leg. It gets them some money, but more importantly, it recognizes they are a really good teacher, and that's professional pride. And the third thing is persistence pays. We stay at it year after year. We don't doodle with the program every year, but at the end, we take a look and see, well, how can we improve this? We have some slides, and the first one, what have you put up there, Marianne?
This is Dallas in math and science from 1990 to 2006.
The little red bars are what was going on before we got there, and then each year thereafter. So continuous improvement. And this, the district is about 93 or 4% minority. Not quite that for these schools, but that's the story. And if you'd give me another slide or two, because it makes another point.
This is African American and Hispanic students, same school district.
What this shows, these are the African American and Hispanic, and the average was roughly, it was under 10. Now it's way up. And what we think we've demonstrated, if you have a good curriculum and an excellent teacher, they can perform. So that's the message. They win scholarships, they go on to college, they graduate. So this is another important slide. This shows the results of a 6-year graduation rate of all the students who stayed in Texas institutions, and the pass rate is by ethnic group, and the blue bar shows those students who had passed an AP exam and those that didn't. And you'll see that the pass rate for the African American and Hispanic graduation rate who had passed an AP course was greater than the Anglo that didn't. So, pretty obvious. Get yourself into the AP course and pass it. Then you're prepared. And our stated goal, we want them to graduate from high school and college. That's the payoff. The college is the financial payoff, and it's also the career option payoff. You have a lot more options when you have that 4-year graduation in hand. So those are, and I should say that a couple other things. I want to address scalable. This program has been selected by the ExxonMobil Foundation, and they've put a $125 million commitment behind it. And they told us this program not only works, and they've been working at it, but they said it works better than ours, but it's scalable. And the reason it's scalable, we've been very fortunate. We picked the College Board. They have a national curriculum. It's voluntary, but it's a national curriculum. They have a national wonderful teacher training program, and we require our teachers to go to training every year. We make 5-year commitments, and if the teacher is in our program, every year, teacher training, wonderful teacher training of the College Board. And third is the exam. It's nationally prepared, nationally graded, and reported. You can't fiddle with it. So these are good numbers. You can't monkey with them. And those 3 things make this a national scalable program, in my opinion. Let's see. I would say one other thing. We are not the TEA. What we try to do is build models that work and at a reasonable cost. And if anybody wants to take that model and replicate it anywhere, they go with our blessing, and we'll help them all we can. So we're not trying to do everything in every district. We have shown it will work with minorities. It'll work in rural schools. It'll work in urban schools. It'll work in different parts of Texas. And every year we gather the data, we disaggregate it, and it works. So it has that benefit. I will mention one other thing, and then I think it's long-term, very important. We started with advanced placement, and we wound up our biggest district at the time was Dallas, 93 or 4% minority. We knew from the background a lot of those kids had a tough environment. So we took the same standards of advanced placement and pushed it down to the 6th grade. So we now have an integrated curriculum starting in 6th grade, and for every teacher in every grade, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, in English, math, and science, the teacher gets a book. This one is Algebra 1. And it has the curriculum, it has the benchmarks that make specific what that teacher needs to get their students to do, and lesson plans. And so we have, this is like a book for each teacher in each grade that we're working in. This is the life sciences. This is life and earth sciences for the middle grades. And then here we have pre-AP English, 9th grade. The point is we are pushed it down to the 6th grade. Teachers love it. It also enabled us to work vertical teams of teachers where you have the AP teacher in say, math, and then you have the other teachers for each of those grades, and they work together so that they know they're part of a team and what they have to do with that student to move them along so when they hit the AP grade, they're ready to pass it. And our next step, I shouldn't say this, well, it's a goal. We're going to push it down to the kindergarten. So,
Good job.
And I was telling Kern Wildenthal about this. He's the president of the medical school, interested in education. He said, well, the only thing I can think of next is you get a dating service. So, but we are down to we are from 6th grade through 12, English, math, and science, and our goal is to add kindergarten to fill in so we'll have a complete offering of public education.
Thanks, Peter. I'd like to return to the point that Uri made in his remarks, and Larry kind of made a related point. I think we hear a lot from teachers about the challenges of getting established as a teacher, of all the different kinds of things they have to deal with. You're having teachers coming into this with maybe minimal preparation if they're doing an alternative certification program, maybe a lot of preparation if they get a full program for 4 years and you teach. But how do we, and Uri's making the point, the districts can hardly even manage to judge whether they are successful in some of the programs they're implementing. So how do we help get these people established and help districts really serve them well? What policies do we need to put in place? What things need to change to do a better job there?
So the focus so far has been on individual teachers. Seymour Saracen, the wonderful social theorist, said in 1952, you put a great person in a bad system, system wins every time. A really important principle. What we know about school reform is that the best teachers as individuals do not have a big effect on school outcomes. It's the quality of school leadership that really matters. It's the way teachers interact with each other. So now in Texas, there's no single largest provider of new teachers. Districts are certifying their own. We have UTeach. We have some good alternative certifications. We have some good traditional programs. Districts have to spend their energy now on induction, on building a culture which allows teachers to learn from each other. I talked about Teach for America. The data, independently done, randomized controlled trials, show that even Teach for America teachers who get certification in their first year can only move urban kids from the 14th to the 17th percentile in math. The national data show that the children in the classrooms of first-year teachers lose ground relative to where they were the year before. We have to build learning environments in schools that allow teachers to capitalize on their knowledge and allow them to be effective. Just a last little piece about this. Texas is a leader in making a more modern performance pay system for teachers. Peter talked about incentives. But economists know, you know, that incentives are mediated by preferences and personal values. And if we don't figure out, the business community tends to think that it's money, give them more money, and human beings are economic animals. But teacher preferences and values are not oriented around money. That's what the Susanna Loeb research shows. We're investing $350 million roughly in teacher compensation reform. We need to get it right and create incentives that strengthen the school environment so that teachers will want to be there, will stay, will thrive, and will learn from each other.
I think I would like to add that I think the concept of a teacher preparation program, regardless of how it's structured, leaves often the impression that the people who finish the program now are teachers.
It does.
And I think what's fair to say is that they're ready to begin a teaching career, but they have a lot to learn. And 8 or 10 years ago, there was a state requirement that teacher preparation programs were required to provide induction support, so to continue to support all of their graduates. One of those lovely unfunded mandates that really has not been widely implemented. Actually, in the UTeach program, it's one of the things that we do. We believe that it contributes to the retention that we see in our program, but we are using our own money to provide staff that follow our graduates, call them up on the phone, go out and visit their classrooms, take over and teach a demonstration lesson, helping our graduates, who we think are some of the best new teachers out there, continue to learn, continue to improve, to adapt to the unique circumstances they find in their classroom. And it's one of those things that reinforces the fact that we need to continue to provide support. Along those lines, we also have to recognize that some of these beginners tend to be clustered in the most difficult situations. They're naturally hired into the classrooms that have vacancies. The turnover is greater in the more difficult situations. Districts see no incentives to put their best teachers in the most difficult situations, maybe because they feel they'll lose their best teachers, but the fact is then they're giving up on their kids. So that's a real challenge.
So how do we fix this? What do we have to do to make a change here? I mean, I think we see this at UT, even the hiring practices of the schools disadvantage them, because our math and science students are being recruited right now by ExxonMobil, you name it. The recruiters are on campus. The schools don't start recruiting until usually May or June. So, even these very minimal things, and then the assignments are difficult. Several preps for new teachers, these kinds of issues. We treat our new faculty at the college level like gold, like they're precious commodities, and we vie for them and so on. I don't see that happening in school districts.
However weak the instructional leadership is in districts, the HR departments are an order of magnitude worse. And we need to figure out how to professionalize and modernize human resource development in school districts. As Mary Ann said, the New Teacher Project studies of Portland showed that there were a lot of people who wanted to teach. That's what Teach for America and New Teacher Project are showing. But the hiring schedule, the hiring procedures discourage anyone but the strongest willed and the people with the fewest options, right, to actually continue. The question is, from a policy point of view, what can be done to improve the HR functions of our districts?
I'll hit on that just as a person who has to take a district budget and figure out how to apply that to the greatest needs across the district. In Pflugerville ISD, I'll just give an example. We have about 2,000 employees. And up until this last year, take a guess at how many professionals we had in our HR department. How many professional salaried people in our HR department? Dixie knows because she's a teacher in Pflugerville ISD. One. One. Everyone else was clerical support staff. Why is that? Because we want to spend as much money as possible in the classroom and not in the administration building. But the reality is, when we shortchange that HR department, we shortchange our program over the long term. Right. But when the state tells you that any time you spend money on central administration, you're not doing what you should, it's a difficult line to walk. So that's one of the challenges. We now have two, so that's good. We feel like we're actually going to have a much better professional development model. But one of the policy changes that we can look at is, I think when we take a look at the type of support teachers need once they get in the classroom, or even when they begin their very first classroom experience. I was talking with Chris Botterman last night. I had the pleasure of sitting next to her at dinner last night. She is a presidential awardee from Grapevine Colleyville, and we were talking about student teaching and how important it is for good, energetic, enthusiastic young teachers to have a good experience in student teaching. And I know when I place student teachers at the university at some point you're almost looking for warm bodies. You're not looking for whether these people are highly qualified. And I said, and then we only pay those people like, what, $500 just to serve as a mentor to these student teachers. She said, well, I don't even get $500. I don't get anything. And you just look at that and you think, boy, that really doesn't make a lot of sense. And that's a policy decision that we make at the university level of where to put our money. If we want, and it's not to say that paying teachers to monitor student teachers and be their mentor is going to get the best teachers, but I think the other way around really has shown that it doesn't do it. So,
just a point of crisis. We've talked about teachers. We need to talk about principals. In New York City, the average experience level of a high school principal is 1.9 years. In Chicago, it's 2.1 years. In LA, it's 2.0 years. It's very hard to be an administrator in the current accountability environment, and we can't give up on the accountability side. Right? So we have to figure out, how are we going to support these individuals who have 3,000 kids in their schools, 450 adults, and 2 years of experience? We need to make sure that we build incentive systems for people, healthy incentive systems for people to go into school leadership. Everybody likes teachers, everybody dislikes administrators, my dean accepted. We need to think about
what a politician.
Both. It's part of a system.
We, almost 20 years ago, set up a Principals Institute at one of our leading colleges, and it went very well for a couple of years. And then the agenda changed. Instead of providing the academic leadership, they were talking about parking and the lunchroom, food services, and a whole raft of things that it kind of digressed, and so we said, well, that's not our goal, so we quit. But they got to get it. It's not just the support for what? And I think support for academic leadership. Mm-hmm. And we've had a wonderful person run our advanced placement strategies named Greg Fletcher, and he is an expert at identifying talent and recruiting it and helping train it. That's what you need. So we got to know what we're looking for. First year we started our program in Dallas, they abolished the training division. So we had zip.
It's the first to go. It's the first to go.
That was considered not important. Well, they've changed. I want to add one other thing that we don't talk about very much. And I don't know if you still have that slide in there. It shows the scholarships won. And there's almost no one counting the amount of dollars of scholarships won. It's just not anyone's responsibility. But anyway, we finally got it. And the first year, the Dallas AP students won about $25 million. And the second year, this is a couple of years ago, the second year they won $45 million. And last year they won $64 million. Now we're talking about, especially if you have a large family, this is the only way they're going to get to go to college. Because you go away to college now, and if you're not living at home, go to a state school, tabs about $16,000 or $17,000. Part of it's tuition, books, living expense, so on. So, big hit. And they've got to win those scholarships, and if you have the right kind of teacher corps, they will. We're not. This is letting the taxpayer know that something's coming back. Different pocket, but it's coming back, and they are supporting it. So, data.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about assessment and we published an op-ed piece in I think the Dallas paper, Dallas Morning News, a year or so ago about the U-Teach program, and I got what I would consider hate mail from several teachers in the Dallas school district saying that I was a Pollyanna, that it didn't matter how good people were that we were training to be teachers. They would get out into the school districts and they would be forced to teach to the test. They would never be able to use their creativity. They would never be able to really nurture the excellent students because the assessment would drive everything and drive the curriculum. And yet, as I just said, we have to be able to, we have to know where we are. We have to be able to assess this. We even have to do more of it. I think we have to be able to assess who is a good teacher. How do you tell? But on the other hand, I mean, we've heard a little bit of talking around this. Well, yeah, it depends on what kind of test it is and how you use it, but can we give policymakers some real suggestions about how to change this system so that it really doesn't dampen everything down to mediocrity? Carol?
Especially since we have Senator Shapiro and Representative Eisler here, I'll throw out a provocative idea that I think some other folks have discussed real briefly. When Michael showed his data earlier about when you looked at the poverty level of students in the schools and really the probability that those students would be successful on standardized tests, and you looked at the right-hand side of that data, anyone with a modicum of mathematical literacy could see that the probability of being labeled a failure as a teacher if you taught in one of those schools is incredibly high. It doesn't matter how great of a teacher you are, the probability that you will be labeled a failure for taking on schools that have challenges is very high. We absolutely must have an accountability system. You don't know if you've gotten there, if you don't know where you're going to begin with, and we have got to have measures to determine, are our students learning? But right now, we have a system that is somewhat punitive. You can fall in one of 35 different measures in high school, and that drops you down a rating. And you could be doing great in the other 34, but that one measure will drop your school from exemplary to recognized, from recognized to low performing, etc. If we had an accountability system that was additive rather than subtracting and taking away and punitive, it might encourage folks to be willing to take on those challenges, because nobody wants to be called a failure, least of all the people who are the most ambitious, goal-oriented kinds of teachers, and those are the people you need in those classrooms. If we had an additive system which took into account the gains you made with some students who might have started very, very low. You're the chemistry teacher at one of these schools. You get kids coming in, and the likelihood that they know enough chemistry even to be semi-successful by the time they get to that end of course, which I think is a good idea, the end of course is going to help us, is really, really slim. It's an uphill climb. But if you could at least get some recognition for the gain you made, and I know we're looking at gain score analysis and value-added achievement. If you got some recognition for the gain you made in students, even if they weren't where everybody else was yet, we want to get there, then it encourages teachers to work in those environments, to take on those challenges, and encourages principals to stay in those schools. When you look at a school like Johnson High School and Austin ISD, it's no wonder they can't keep a principal there. Who wants to work in an environment where every single day everyone else is telling you you're a failure? No, that's just human nature. People don't want to do that. And until we recognize that as the policymakers, we're probably not going to make a whole lot of difference in those schools because people don't want to work there.
Peter?
Let me offer you a little hope. A model already exists. Now, we don't have the data to implement it, but it was developed by a couple of very fine engineers at TI. And it has to do with value added. And they have made the model work, and the gain for each student, each year, each subject, each teacher. So we already have the model.
Yeah, mathematically it's possible.
Well, it's more than that. It's done in Texas schools. Now, you got to get the data acquisition and also a commitment you're not going to try to use the data to embarrass the teacher or the school. But the model exists for exactly that kind of gain and it recognizes, that people are different, teachers are different, but what you want is gain, sustained gain. And I think that model exists, but we don't have the proper funding yet to implement it.
So accountability is a blunt instrument wielded from a great distance. Right? Okay. It's the job of school leaders to react intelligently to this system and use it for the good. Yes, there can be technical improvements. The politics is pretty transparent around it. There is a punitive element. I think we need to get better at making less punitive but not less effective instruments for getting people to focus on kids they used to ignore. Right? This is really important. But just some data. In the real world of schools, not just the accountability data, assessment is the most effective way to get student learning increased. If you look at teacher quality, the single best piece of work, Deborah Ball's work, Mathematical Knowledge for Teaching. Deborah Ball is like so magnificent, a real national treasure. She did a piece of work on measuring teachers' knowledge of mathematics and how to teach it. Brian Rowan, one of the great evaluators, studied it, found, randomized controlled trials, found that a full standard deviation increase in teacher knowledge led to only 1/25th of a standard deviation increase in student learning. That teacher knowledge by itself has very little effect on student learning if the conditions aren't in place. Assessment, on the other hand, short cycle assessment, Dylan Williams' work, Malcolm Swan, Paul Black, the British theoreticians who study this, 0.7 effect sizes, massive gains. So we need to have a healthy, broad view of assessment, accountability assessment, instructional assessment, and just last comment, data analysis has become a fetish. Everyone is sending administrators to courses around analyzing data. The question needs to be, is what decisions do people have to make in the system? Not just analyzing data. We have to get clear about who needs what information and organize the assessment information around the key decisions that legislators need to make, school boards need to make, all the way down to what our teachers need to make to nurture students' intelligence.
I'm going to take some questions from the audience here. We have quite a few of them and pose them, it looks like, some of them to particular panelists here. First of all, to Peter, do we adequately educate parents about what pre-AP and AP means, particularly in the middle school years, in order to motivate students to enter the pre-AP and AP courses?
No, our education of parents is terrible. It's one of the great areas of potential for our continued progress, and we're going to need to do that. Fortunately, I think that the wind is at our back in certain aspects of education, and that's the math science. I read a lot of things that I can tell you that the op-ed piece, editorial piece, the coverage of the news media is very, very positive, and they see it as a national need. So I think the environment in which we'll operate will be favorable, but we've got a lot to do to tell parents what the potential for their children is by taking AP and pre-AP.
Yeah. Uri, what is the right focus, do you think, between university programs and these alternative programs? Or is there one? Or we just do everything that we can in every direction?
Well, I think that whenever we can promote healthy competition among providers, quality can go up. So monopolies aren't good, and the monopolies have been broken apart. And the question is, what is an appropriate form of competition? Texas has moved pretty far along the line of trying to get better measures. But until we have a data system like Florida's, where we actually have linked student-teacher records, our accountability measures are going to be imperfect. And when accountability measures are imperfect, it's very hard to know what they generate.
And it's hard to evaluate professional development because unless you, especially large-scale professional development, without
that
something that links that grain size.
Yeah, we really, really need that.
Right,
we get this you teach all the time.
Oh, yeah.
We need to be able to.
And what happens is whenever this comes up, odd bedfellow relationships form among people who would never even want to be in the same town with each other to thwart this work. And we need to stand up and say, what are the questions that parents need to be able to answer? What are the kind of questions we need to be able to answer about our schools? This is the biggest investment we make. And the legislature here has to have the courage to actually move forward on this and not let these weird coalitions of left and right, undermine our ability to know what we're getting when we invest in education.
I'd like to add one other audience that needs to be educated, and that's the media. They could do a lot more if they were better informed and would write about it. We have a lot of success stories out there that don't get their attention, which is unfortunate. And that,
I really agree.
Yeah,
I still say we need a major TV show that shows how sexy it is to be a science teacher or a scientist or a dean. Real. Well, a related question, Uri. Why does the misconception that alternately certified science teachers have science degrees continue? I'm not sure I understand. Where's the data? Are they generally, or do they have degrees in the discipline?
Yeah,
or?
So Linda Zentek at A&M, who's a star, won their PhD award, Best Dissertation Award, collected data on this, and it shows there aren't really all that big differences between teachers coming in with different routes. The hopes of the people in the alternative certification movement that they would develop real innovation, except for the Teach for America, and those hasn't really been borne out yet. So I think we need to...
How long do they stay in teaching? Is that's improving, I understand?
It's improving, but not quite.
2 years, isn't it? Teach for America?
No. Teach for America, remember, Teach for America started with the idea that half the people would stay in teaching in one form or another, and half would go into government, leadership, law, politics. 57% of the Teach for America teachers who started 3 years ago are still teaching.
Okay, good.
And the superintendent of District of Columbia, Michelle Rhee, is a Teach for America alum. The founders of KIP, which is a national treasure, and of Yes Academy are both Teach for America alumni. The I Have a Dream Foundation, which I was the Eugene M. Lang Visiting Professor of Mathematics and Social Change at Swarthmore. We don't have that title at UT Austin. But now the head of that is a Teach for America alum. So we remember that 57% now are staying, which is around the national average, and the other people are going out as privileged citizens with a deep knowledge of the complexity of education. That's really important.
Valuable.
They're the creators of the KIPS.
How do teacher training agencies, and this goes for both alternative pathways, I think, and ours, address these other issues in the classroom? Do we train our UTeach students, for example, to handle all these problems that you brought up, Larry? How do we prepare them for this? Or do we do it with induction support? And what about the alternative programs?
Well, I think one of the critical things to understand about the UTeach program that probably wasn't on the slides that I showed is that there is a significant number of students that we recruit into the program who don't stay in the program. And probably one of the biggest reasons for that is the fact that we insist on early experiences where they go out into the schools, and there are people who say, well, this sounds good, or the promise of scholarships or whatever sounds good, or I really want to serve sounds good. But when they find themselves in a school, they find that they aren't really comfortable in that environment. We focus on urban schools. We focus on classrooms with difficulties. And I think the crucible that we put our students in as they are developing helps to prepare them for the kinds of challenges they'll face. I said earlier they're not finished products when they graduate, and they will surely see things they've never seen before as they go on in their careers, but they certainly have had a chance not only to read about or to talk about or hear about, but to actually experience working in difficult environments. So I think the field experiences are a large part of that. Again, I think that the reliance in our program heavily on master teachers. And I see that there are several You Teach master teachers in the audience here, and I encourage you to seek them out and talk to them further. But they have rich experiences that they can share with the students. And so I think that, again, is something that we know what many of the major challenges are. We focus on that. We deal with issues of equity. We deal with issues of language learning. We deal with issues of students that can't read, and how then they will learn from a textbook or whatever sort of material the curriculum involves. So there are a number of these big issues that we target as we design the curriculum and implement it.
I should have added, we use the lead teacher or master teacher concept in the advanced placement strategies, and it's absolutely invaluable. They are wonderful.
To pick up on a point that Larry made, the initial insight that led to You Teach, I mean, there are several fathers to this thing, but in our discussion when we were talking about this way back, was the Elaine Seymour's beautiful study, a Scottish anthropologist who studied science majors and engineering majors in American colleges, in 13 of them. And I found in an appendix in the back of that book that I shared with you, that 32 or 33% of all science majors listed teaching as one of their career choices, but almost none of them listed it as their first choice. We replicated that study, Rosa Serra, anthropologist at UT, and we found 30% of UT entrants to the College of Natural Sciences had teaching as a possibility, as a thought, usually second or third choice. When asked why, an individual middle or high school teacher's name came up very often. The idea of You Teach, by the way, not really being disseminated in the NIMSY effort, which is lost from this effort, is that allows honor students' interests to be mathematicians and scientists, but allow them to keep their interests, their options open, and give them early experiences, right, that will draw them in. That works. Some kids are thinking about it, but they say it's not for them, and they know it right away. The other students say, I'm making a positive choice to do this. I want my life to be useful, right? A lot of them are making a decision based on their spiritual and personal values. That's who we want in classrooms.
That is being retained, actually, in the replications, so that's great. Well, I think we're out of time. It's clear this is a big problem, very complex, lots of different elements that need to be addressed, including district and school issues as well as teacher preparation itself. But thank you very much for these great questions and discussion. Okay. Oh, we have a couple of announcements. One is that all of the presentations for today will be on the web if you want to get them or look at them. And Rob?
Yeah, real fast. This has been a fantastic session, and I would like, on behalf of Senator Shapiro and me, to thank you for your input. And we were squirming in our seats because we actually we're going to put together a new accountability system. And of course we would probably get sent to the back of the room for talking during your presentation, because
talk as much as you like.
You spurred great discussion, and I know that there's plenty of input in this room. And the reason I interrupted, and I apologize, is that I wanted you to have our cards, both Florence's and mine, so that you can put it out that our emails are welcoming your suggestions and your comments, because this is representative government, and we certainly want to make a difference. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wow. If we don't do anything else today, we've accomplished the goals of this conference. So thank you very much.